Hi, my name is Gwendolyn Gausworth, and I am the president and founder of Visual Thinking, Inc. We used to be called Quality Methods International for many, many years. And then circumstances conspired, and I changed the name of the company. And man, this is what we do. We teach visual thinking. I thought, wow, it took a really long time. It took us like 20 years. I'm really happy you're here, and I'm happy to be with you. I'm going to be presenting today on material that is special for cultural transformation. It's how visuality transforms. And I began this discussion when we did our clinic in January, and it had come up about what are the behaviors to start building respect. But I want to put it in a certain framework today, because while I'll be doing part of the presentation through the lens of my methodology, particularly for operators, work that makes sense, although the approach I'm about to share with you goes for every level, our so-called 10 doorways, which I'll show you as part of the presentation very, very quickly. The purpose of visuality is to put visual devices in place, but the devices are put into place as language. They are connectors. So it's about respect, every individual, and the visual workplace. Our company has been in existence, well, really, I started this work in 1984, and I've worked with all kinds of companies, automotive, aerospace, a lot in aerospace, textiles, electronics, of course, some health centers, depots, several of them, food, and biomedical. I am active in the practice of implementation. That's about 3/4 of my work. The other part of my work is to write and to create new methodologies or to make them stronger. I'm one of the 8 faculty fellows in the world of the Shingo Institute. Very proud of that as well. I'm in the company of some really smart people. And the Shingo Institute calls upon us from time to time for our input, and we also teach. I have 7 books on visuality or improvement strategies, and you can find them on our website, and a lot of other things, and articles and 50 or 60 podcasts, just a lot of free material. So today we're going to be talking about respect. We're going to talk about the principle of respect, and then we're going to connect it with visuality. The principle of respect has been promoted very actively by the Shingo Prize and the Shingo Institute. It's one of their 10 guiding principles, and really considered to be the first. There it is, the first, the foundation. Respect every individual, lead with humility. To some extent, the Shingo Institute was drawing from the Japanese tradition of respect every individual, because they have a society that emphasizes that. Typically, we talk about respect just to set up our conversation in 2 parts. There's owed respect, which basically, when you read the articles on this, it's respect we get just because we're human, because we are another person on the planet. It kind of comes with the territory. Owed respect. And there's a second classification of respect that's called earned respect. That means you've done something worthwhile, something that we respect you for, a particular achievement, an outcome, because you're an important person and you've earned that position of respect. But the kind of respect that I want to talk to you about today is something that is less visible and less automatic. And I hope to build this conversation, this concept with you in a way that makes sense and becomes utilizable. As I was mentioning at the very beginning, when we were just first saying hello, I am interested in sharing with you the ways that I have discovered over these 30, 35 years of active implementation, even to today, the ways that I've discovered will create a respect opportunity for the people that I'm interfacing with. You could think of them as tricks. I call them tools, and they're very specific. There are 6 tools. They're built into the methodologies, but I believe that you can transfer them to any situation, to any kind of training, and even to your personal interactions when you're at work. So I gave you my take on owed respect and earned respect. Now I'm going to make a jump to visuality so that we can start talking about that relationship. The foundation of visuality is the absence of information, the so-called information deficits. That's the problem in the workplace. So I'm now focused on the workplace. I'm now focusing on the roots of visuality, why it came about, at least in my mind, in my experience. This is language that I've kind of invented, their terms of art, in order to explain what visuality is in my view and how it works. The problem is missing information. There's information, and the question is, can you see the information? Can you see it? Because it's there. This is the pre-visual state. This is the post neat and clean that you get from 5S state. It's orderly, it's neat, it's clean. But is it talking to you? Is the workplace connected with you through your senses? Can you see the information? Now, let me also say as a foundational piece that when I say see, I am talking about the sense of sight. The visual workplace is a sensorial workplace. It is there so that our senses can be responding to whatever the stimulus is. Because we're sight dominant, we have favored visuality, the visual sight, because it's so dominant. And later on, we'll make much of it. I'll be giving you a little bit more detail on this statement. 50% of our involuntary brain is dedicated to finding and interpreting visual data. 50% of our involuntary brain, involuntary like our heart, it is seeking the perimeter, it's seeking information, it's seeking meaning. It's seeking triggers that will cause behavior, response. This is simply so. The visual workplace is powerful for that reason. And I'll anchor that in some photos and some images in a moment. If we are not sighted, if we have impaired sight, then our other senses take over. And the sterling example of that, the most iconic and astonishing example, is Helen Keller, who was deprived of sight, speech, and hearing, and yet led an illuminated life. She simply developed. She worked her entire life to engage her other senses so that she could make up for that sight deficit. So visuality is about information that we can't see. This is missing information. It is a pernicious enemy. And when I was looking for an equivalent of pernicious, I watched Predator again with Arnold Schwarzenegger. It's like this. This guy that you see here, so ugly and so present, can disappear. One of his great weapons is that he can make himself invisible. Completely invisible. And so he's just not there. And that's the way it is with missing information. But it isn't like the predator, just invisible. It is literally not there. And I really want to invite you to wrap your mind around that the visual workplace has been created because of what is not there. And that thing that is not there is what causes 90% of our struggles at work. Lean takes care of one part of it. It takes care of the critical path and pull. Visuality takes care of the landscape of information, which in most companies is not just invisible, but it isn't there. The information is not available. physically anyway. And what our friend Arnold did, I just watched this again last night, is that he used the fact that this enemy was invisible to make himself invisible. Do you remember this? He began to think like the enemy and he covered himself in mud. They were equivalent. He was invisible to the predator and the predator was invisible to him. And this is very much what it's like when you're going after information deficits. This is what we teach when we teach visual thinking. A visual workplace is populated by hundreds, no, by thousands of visual devices. They're invented by a workforce that knows how to think visually. And this is what visual thinking means. So I want you to get this piece of it so you understand how the methodology is in and of itself respect building. It is the ability of a person to recognize the footprint of the enemy, which is called motion, to recognize motion and the information deficits, which is the enemy, that trigger that motion, and then to eliminate both through solutions that are visual. So when we take information that is invisible and we make it visible, the footprint called motion goes away, the enemy goes away with it. It is like this. It is like big game hunting. You are tracking the enemy. You are watching, looking for the footprint called motion. Big game hunting. Yeah. Definition of motion is Ohno's definition, moving without working. He created that definition when he saw a machine working and a man wasn't. He got really irritated. Ohno was a very irritable man. It was what made him aggressively great, sort of like Shingo was. He was my sensei for a number of years. He was irritable. He didn't need to know your name. He didn't need to know anything except what he wanted to say. And he was brilliant. Motion, moving without working. Here are the forms of motion. Guessing, wandering, checking again, counting again, redoing, reworking, stopping. All of these are forms of motion. They're practically invisible. They're microscopic. And the big bugbears, asking questions, answering questions, being interrupted, and waiting for information. These are not common wastes. These are the wastes that create struggle, especially if you've gone lean and you haven't gone visual. There'll be this residue of struggle and you'll try to solve it through lean, through pull, critical path. But it's deeper than that. It's in the microcosm of the workplace. Motion is anything you have to do or else you can't do your work, but it is not your work. So this is what we teach, and we teach it to executives and we teach it to operators. So let's move on to the visual workplace. The visual workplace visuality is a system of thinking, and then it is a system of doing. Then it becomes a system of connected visual devices that create that language. But the thinking comes first. Here's an example of a before, similar to the one we saw before. Can you see the information is the question. The information is there somewhere, but we can't see it, we can't access it, we can't use it, we can memorize it and hope that we remember. We can tell other people what to do, but they are not independent. Let's see the after. And this is all the work of Raquel. This is when he agreed inside himself to continue with work that makes sense. He had come to the training, he wasn't the least bit interested. Attendance is mandatory, he had to show up. And participation, as always, is voluntary. And he didn't want to participate. That was okay. We continued, at one point he said yes. And he did this, his revolution. They called this in his factory, recently acquired by Parker Hannifin, the no thinking cell. And when I asked Rick to describe what happens when people go into a cell, what do they do if they don't think, since we put such a premium on thinking, he said they dance. They do the dance of work. There's no struggle. They just can do their work. And everyone wanted to be on the second and third shift, wanted to be at this cell. So he told me, Rick says, everybody wants to be in my cell because they don't have to think, they just have to dance. But that's what we want. We want flow. And one of the outcomes of visuality, just as critical path lean creates, and I'm talking about the anchored definition of lean, not the everything is lean. The critical path and pull work together to create lean. And visuality creates flow. And Ono told us, flow where you can and pull where you must. So it's just a really nice balanced understanding. This brain function is our inborn engine. I want to tie that to respect in just a moment. Because 50% of everyone's brain is dedicated, and this wording is, so to speak, scientific, reduced for the layman wording. This is not my wording. This is what the research talks about, is dedicated to finding and interpreting visual data. Because that's in all of us, one must take as a given that that is a function in all of us, unless we are sight impaired. And then, as I said, the other senses will take over. But we, as humans, are constantly translating data into information and information into meaning. That's what our brain does. It does a lot of other things, but it certainly does that. Belief and behavior is triggered by that meaning. Another word for meaning is perception. Meaning is perceptual, but nonetheless, it runs the show. What we think we see, what we think we understand, what we perceive turns into our belief and behavioral structure, which is to say, without a visual workplace, behavior then needs to be compelled in some other way. If there isn't meaning built into the workplace so that the workplace is partnering with me, is speaking to me, then how is it that work gets done? Well, we memorize it. We're supervised. We are taught by our problems, by our own performance. It's not a natural way for humans to engage in their environment. They can do it much more elegantly. We are visual beings. Therefore, we live in a visual world, not the other way around. These community visual devices came up because we needed them for our own safety, because of the complexity of the car universe, of traffic, also traffic in airports, also human traffic on foot. The complexity of the human community has forced these devices, and we're very grateful for them. We simply respond to them seamlessly. We don't feel as though we're obeying. We don't feel as though our will is being taken away. They're mostly the creation of design and civil engineers, and we benefit from them. In other words, we don't have a voice in them except through our accidents and our mistakes. Then the designers and the civil engineers learn, well, that didn't work. There's that famous picture of a college campus where there's a clean turn on the pavement and everybody takes the shortcut. There's a beaten path that takes a shortcut. And the designer said, well, that was a failure. I'm trying to get humans to make a clean left turn. And they're taking the shortcut. I guess we'll pave the shortcut because there's no way of changing the behavior. So it's that kind of a relationship. But let me build this piece a little bit more about the connection between seeing and thinking.
Yeah, hi. I just had a question about Rick L's cell, and there was a lot of green, blue, and red.
Mm-hmm.
So what is that telling him? What is that telling people?
That was telling him several things. You go back to that picture. And tell me why you want to know. Are you just trying to understand how he devised this? Tell me what the question under your question is.
I get the understanding the use of color, but it looks like there's the colors used all over the place. Different drawers, different shelving. Does it mean the same thing? How does he know? How does the next shift know? What is that?
Mm-hmm.
What does it mean?
And it's interesting that you should focus on that, which actually is his own color code system to differentiate. Well, what do you think it differentiates? If you saw a drawer of gauges, these PSI meters and these PSI meters, what do you think those colors
I
refer
think
to?
size,
Possibly size.
or the ones he uses the most and the least, and maybe
It
next.
could be that. It could in fact be that. It could in fact. Here we have collar gauges.
Because he got the green ones right out front, so he's going to use that the most, maybe.
So that's very interesting, V, because if that worked for you on this level, which is inside your cell, and there's a lot of implementation questions right here about how do you implement if the space is truly shared. In this case, it's a union shop. First shift was given ownership of the visual output. So it was Rick's decision, but the rules in other plants are different. In many plants, the three shifts will work together on, they'll experiment and try out people's ideas and come up with something that works across all three shifts. But in this case, Rick wanted his three models to be seen. So these are his three models. And you can see that played again. That was his choice. And because it was on the cell level, not on the macro level, but on the micro level, and these are easy things to put into place as you implement. You will also see that he has done that through his various shims and jams and his tooling here. He's also done it on this cart, which is, can you see it all right? Which is a cart that he uses for his changeover to model. He's also done it here on the interface of his machine. He's changed his adjustments into setting. He's preset his models. Okay, so that was his choice. And the people who work in the cell follow his choice because he was the owner of that cell in this particular company. Does that give you enough of an answer?
Yeah, no, that's really good, actually. I just have more questions now.
Yes, I'm sure. And just stay afterwards. We can talk about your questions. I'm happy to. But thank you very much for your question. And I will tell you that even though this presentation is about how to build respect, those are, such important questions about the implementation itself. But I'm going to continue and set up a few more things.
Tom has a question as well.
Okay, and we'll take one more question and then we'll continue. Go ahead, Tom.
I'm just going to make a comment on that.
Please.
In that, depending on how many products he's making at that, maybe the greens all go together. So those are the tools that make the green, the tools that are used to measure that green, etc. I've used similar things.
You're right, Tom. There's all kinds of ways to slice that pumpkin, and the rules are set so people know what the color categories stand for. There's a great deal to be said about the implementation methodology, but I want to let you know that in my work, we allow for experimentation that is under the control of the operator. If the operator wants to, and that's one of the major respect builders, that the operator is in control. And therefore, don't you think that we have to make sure the operator begins to exercise the muscle called tolerance, to allow other people to experiment as a way of signifying respect to them as well. So there's a lot. We're not doing implementation issues today, but we've touched upon a lot of them in the last two comments. and they're very, very important. Right now, so I'm going to continue. Thank you for your comment. Spot on. Thank you. Seeing is thinking. So we're getting that the brain is very important. The eyes, this is science. This is a quote from a scientist saying, he wrote in this article, the eyes are the brain. The eyes are how information comes into the brain. Again, sight dominant. The mind is a pattern seeking mechanism. We teach that to operators out of respect, because one of the ways we talk about visuality is we say, we grow leaders. Now that's an OPEX function perhaps, or an executive function. But when you say it in this example to operators, we really want them to be in control of their corner of the world, even if it's for only one shift, and that the mind seeks a pattern is going to help them understand what they need in order to have successful performance. So we share a lot of this research with operators. Let's move on. This is just an illustration of that. The seeking for information, for meaning, is as involuntary and automatic as our heart. And it's one of the reasons why the visual workplace is so important. It is the language that ties the organization together. It is the language. It is the language that is your operational detail living and partnering with me on the shop floor, in the offices, in the hospital. We see it in the community. Why not also at work? Indeed. Just the other day, I was talking to a client and he asked how many primary visual devices do we have in our database? We have over 100,000. We're showing you, kind of our favorite 27 or 28, because they represent different functions in the organization. But this is a language that is as rich, that can be as rich as the language we speak, and as specific, where we're using a thesaurus to make the difference between handsome and beautiful, good looking and exquisite. All those words have a slightly different context. And when people are speaking this language, people will create devices that are exactly the visual information that they need. I'll get to that part right now. I think it's next. The power of one. Yes, it's this section. The power of one. Since information deficits are missing answers, we have to ask, who needs those answers? Who needs those answers that are missing? And the answer is, I do. That I belongs to every single person in your organization. Visuality is I-driven. Now, some of you have immediately jumped into, how can we implement if everybody is the right eye? This has to do with our issue today about respect. One of the problems with the so-called cultural transformations that some companies are trying to go through is that the design of those solutions are made in advance for us. Now, some of them work, absolutely 100%. But in visuality, because of the work that I'm interested in, I've attached myself to this eye and found it to be the most interesting part of the foundation of a visual transformation. And the way that it's captured is through two questions that are conceptual. They are not methodology. They are not a step-by-step procedure that's going to create an outcome, but it will give you a taste of what it means to create visual thinkers. Before I get to those two questions, I just want to show you what I mean by a workforce of visual thinkers. And this is written up in my book, Visual Workplace, if you want to get into detail. These 10 doorways have to do with an organizational function or a group of people like value-add associates, operators, hourly employees. Each doorway is for a specific group, and an outcome, a visual outcome, what I call a category of visual function in the red placard. This one is for value add associates. This is work that makes sense, which I said will be the anchor point in our discussion today, because we'll be talking about operators where has challenged many people to get operators thoroughly on board. This isn't a kind of 2-second revolution. This is the cultivation of the power within. We respect that power and we help people grow it. So these are, you'll see them, supervisors, engineers, managers, visual standards, visual displays, visual scheduling. This is number 4 is for executives, and on and on. Okay, there we have our Pokio, and there we have our pull system. And now we focus on the machine, and now we focus on the office using those first 6 methodologies. We look at the macro environment. This is your OPEX environment. This is your visual linkages. And we look at the integration across multiple buildings or multiple sites. That's doorway number 10, because it requires a special methodology to make that hookup. But we're going to be focusing on operators. Doorway number 1, but the questions I'm about to show you are absolutely 100% relevant to each and every one of those doorways. The 2 questions that drive a visual workplace conceptually. The first question is, what do I need to know? Please notice the I. It does not say, what do we need to know? This is not visuality by consensus or visuality by vote. This is visuality driven by, what do I need to know that I don't know right now in order to do my work? If I don't have it, I'm going to be engaged in motion, moving without working, and that means I won't be able to get my work done. That means my numbers are going to drop, I'm going to be struggling, and I'm going to be very grumpy. I'm either going to be grumpy or I'm going to just disconnect and go, I don't care. Because there's no system, there's no approach that's going to help me get what I need. And so the I just disconnects. The I, in my experience, is the most powerful part of us. Another word for the I is the will, the human will. Powerful enough to disconnect if there's no place for me at work. Powerful enough for me to leave it in the back seat of my car with the window slightly cracked so that it's there at the end of my workday when I go home. I am in control of my will. And many of you know this through your children or your spouses. You can go so far and demand a certain kind of behavior for someone, and they may have to do that, meet you there. But they reserve some other part of themselves that you can never touch. You may have had this experience yourself where you say, okay, I'll give you that, but you're not going to get this. This is a powerful dynamic in humans. We see it most especially in my experience. I've worked in many countries with my fellow citizens, and that they're the ones who taught me this. I cut my teeth in the 1980s on American workplaces, and they were ready to slash my tires. They didn't like me one bit. And I thought, well, jeepers, what am I doing wrong? And I listened and I listened and I listened. I might send you as a follow-up the introduction to the second edition of my Work That Makes Sense book, which won't be out for another 6 months, but it talks about this very thing, perhaps more cogently than I'm doing now, but it talks about the power of the I, and that we cannot create a transformation of the workplace, a physical transformation, which we get through visuality, if that I doesn't have room to explore, to reject, to recreate, and to create. Very powerful. We are with our equals when we are in a company. That is what we're respecting, this power within. But it's been squashed and squished quite a bit, maybe by you, or maybe you have felt the squish. And so we'll get to those tools in a moment. You recognize a need, you put a visual device in place, and you pull that information to you when and as you need it. And you know what this gives you? Purposefully, this first eye, it gives you control over your corner of the world. I just started with an executive yesterday. He's going to go through the executive visual leadership training. We're doing it on Zoom. It'll be fine. And I said to him, I said, here's what's going to be the governance for the whole first part, this I. And you'll be saying things like this, I want. He said, oh, I'd love that. I'd love to tell you what I want. I've been, trying to be humble and trying to be collegial and trying to be consensual, but I can tell you, I really want this, and I don't know how to talk about it. This I is so powerful. It's a pull system. The second question is where we talk about teams, but watch it. It has a very interesting configuration. It is as powerful as the first. And in fact, if you have a veteran workforce, we're talking about either hospitals, offices, or factories. If you have a veteran workforce, they will have a difficult time dealing with what do I need to know, because they'll say, I don't need to know anything. I've been here for 27 years. People are coming to me all the time for information. I'm a champion at my job. Okay, let's get team-minded. What do I need to share? What do I know that other people need to know that I need to share so that they can do their job? They can do it more completely, safer, more precisely. What do I need to share? And in that case, where I'm going back 2 slides, where here you're looking at your own motion and eliminating it through devices that are visual by putting these visual devices in place. In the second question, you are looking at the motion of others. You watch the motion of others and you put a visual device in place to help them. This is self-leadership. This is servant leadership. This is where people grow mightily. But I don't want to talk about their growth right now. I want you to get that this is part and parcel of the change. And then I want to show you the 6 tools, because that's our purpose. We can do the other another day. We want a thinking organization, maybe even to meet with Taiichi Ono said, which is people don't come to Toyota to work, they come to think. What would it be like if that became your emblematic vision? If you're an executive or a plant manager or even a supervisor, I want people to come to my line and think. This was Ono. Ono bragged about this outcome. He did it quietly, place and they think. There's much to be said about his journey. So now let's start tying these together. Charles Dickens wrote a wonderful book called David Copperfield. And in the first paragraph of that book, David is walking along and asking himself, he's a young man, 17, 18. He said, I wonder whether I shall turn out to be the hero of my own life. Will I be the hero of my own life? This is a question that is asked by us in our young, hopeful minds. I'm putting up the jet fighter because I heard this question asked and answered by a gentleman named Ted, who, and when I met him at a very well-known, very large aerospace manufacturer in Texas. And we had been working together for a few months. And he came up to me and he said, you know, Gwen, when I was a kid, my daddy worked here. My daddy made these planes. And I used to see those planes go across my backyard. I'd be standing, I'd look up and I said, my daddy made that. And when I grow up, I'm going to make them too. And I applied to this company when I was just the moment I could, graduated high school, I was there on the door and they gave me a job. It's 27 years later. That's when I met him. That's when we were talking. And he said, what happened? What happened? And he meant it sincerely to me. He wanted an explanation about where that hope went to. He was well paid. He had friends. He enjoyed himself. But this call that he had hadn't been met. What happened? I'm going to make fighter planes when I grow up, just like my daddy. That's what I'm going to do. This is what's inside of us. And I know that you know that. Will I be the hero of my own life? The people who work for you had that question at some point, maybe long before you met them, but it's still there. And it's that we must respect. This will to excel, this will to be excellent. I can map you right now how the brain's pattern-seeking mechanism makes continuous improvement built into each and every one of us. If we have time at the end, maybe I'll go in that direction. But it's built in. It's this pattern-seeking mechanism of the mind that informs our heart to want what is better, what is the next level of pattern. It is that I respect, that I've come to know. I didn't recognize it when I started in the 1980s. And what I'm saying to you is that if you're here listening, or lots of folks couldn't come today, but some did, this is what the journey is about. And you need to find a way to integrate that into whatever methodologies you are teaching, whether it's 5S, or it's Six Sigma, or it's Kaizen Blitzes, whatever it is, continuous improvement, brainstorming. It is hard to stop us from growing. But when you see a mushroom come through the pavement, you know if that mushroom has a will to break through, what must we have? And how hard is it to keep us from growing? Well, the industrial workplace of the 1900s and the 20th century really outdid itself and stopped people from growing. But you have to also understand it was never a value. Taylor never talked about it. Schuhart never talked about it. That the workplace was a place for growth. But we're beginning to understand that now because we're stopped in our improvement journey unless people say, I will enroll. I will join my will with your will because your will is going in the right direction. And because I like it, you're going to get the other part of me. Wow. When I look at the work of Elon Musk, whatever you may think about his finances or his, I don't know, other attributes, he had an extraordinary vision and he taught the same way Jobs did. This extraordinary demand for excellence. And I think, definitely Jobs did damage, but this appetite for excellence is so natural for us. So let me get to it. Brain function is why visuality is eye-driven. It is a natural given ability innate to each of us. So that's absolute premise. And it has been proven to my satisfaction, but it requires cultivation. And it requires decisions on an executive level. That means resources are released, decisions by decision makers. The corporate decision is to cultivate the power within. I may not say it this way, but this is a way to translate respect for every individual. That means to cultivate the power within. And our question is how? Now we've finally come to the 6 pieces, the 6 tools. Let me just stop right now and see if there's any burning questions. If you don't mind, please, no disrespect by saying.
There is a question on the chat room from
Yes, please.
in B, and he says, does visuality evolve from frontline up, or should the highest level leaders first understand the core elements of respect and the I concept?
Yes. So it's very important before a company invites you to come in that you have gone to that company leader and say, this is what the change is about. And can you give me 3 months and I will prove to you that it's a good direction. If he doesn't say yes to it, I mean, it's not going to happen. You're not going to get the resource. You're not going to get the contract. And you certainly are going to get a world of hurt if you proceed without some acknowledgement that this is a deep change. But you absolutely do not need to go into what I'm doing now. I'm doing this for you because you're practitioners, and I want to give you some practical tools. But they don't need to see how the sausage is made, but they need to say yes. And I've never implemented where someone hasn't said yes, and some of them have said literally, Gwendolyn, in a nutshell, we have to stop hating each other. Otherwise, we're going to be non-competitive. Whoa. You want me to come in and get people to stop hating each other? And they said, this was a GM plan. We vetted you for the last 6 months, but this is exactly what will do it. And it did. So that's the answer to the question. However, you can begin the journey of visuality by opening doorway number 4 and working with senior leadership. I've done that twice, and now I'm doing it a third time, started yesterday, where the leader wants to know, how does he get visual? How does she get visual? And through that process, understand what it will mean for engineers and supervisors and operators. But one normally opens the door, the first doorway for operators, for hourly people first, because that's where the power is least. That's where people do not feel they don't have positional authority. Did that answer your question sufficiently? I hope so. Now I'm going to give you the technology of the 6 tools. This process begins in the training room where people are being trained, okay, where they do the learning first. If you're just doing shoot from the hip training and just meeting with people in a semicircle and say, this is what we're going to do, you get it, let's go. This is not a process that will work in those circumstances. You need time. You need time, quiet time, time that is not interrupted by machines or an impossible schedule, time that you've set aside for improvement. And that is one of the first steps for management to demonstrate their desire for a new level of respect, contribution, and empowerment, is that they set aside time. And this is, we never train without an improvement time policy, ever. There's always time set aside. It may be difficult to actually literally find that time, but there's a policy that says this is what we want to do. We will do this. We have to figure out how. And that release of such a precious resource to the improvement cycle is, for many organizations, the first big breakthrough. So here's the training room. We're looking at what lies beneath the success of a methodology. The 6 respect building protocols, and they're very simple. Here they are. Stretch content, teach with no answers, talk amongst yourselves, use motion as a handle, leave the grumblers alone, and supervisors don't supervise. Let me say very quickly, in the classroom, in the training room. Let's look at those. This again is based on my book, Work That Makes Sense, and it's worked on the online training process that we offer. Our clients have that. If they want to do it independently, that's great. So it's a step-by-step methodology that has substantial content. This content is what I call stretch content. We don't dumb our training down, we smart it up, and we teach operators what we know about brain science, about visuality, about site preferences, about everything. The stretch content, for example, the stretch content, here's an example, just one example. We will at some point talk about consider a visually impaired person walking to board a train. He comes upon a section of the platform covered with raised dots. And we ask the question, what are the circles for? These raised dots. What are they for? And we ask, why aren't they square? Figure it out. We give a little hint that says information is being transferred through the stick, and people do what is coming in a moment, which is they talk amongst themselves and they figure it out. We want to challenge people, but we don't want to give them answers. Respect how to number 2 is to teach with no answers. Because we know that this power is within people, we give them the safe space for bringing it out. And let me build this over the first 3 how-tos, because they all work together, these 3 how-tos. So some of the things we talk about in terms of stretch content is a double function of borders, how to increase your power level, follow the natural flow line, name the safety risks that only you see. We say when you see borders, which you may call lines, you see function. Can you make this border do something other than frame? Can you store things, not air? Can we see innovative addresses? And here are some rules about addresses or some clues. So all of this is pretty provocative. We want people to become scientists of their own work. We want them to become scientists of motion. We want them to think, and we want them to delight in that thinking. This is a specific outcome. The mind is teased and challenged, delighted, and then satisfied. First in the classroom and then in operations. This is how we demonstrate in the classroom. Because of the content that we're teaching, we already respect you. And a lot of operators will say, this is like an engineering class. I'm not an engineer, but man, I'm learning so much. And it's created in that way. Hand in hand with that, we don't teach with answers. What do you think this is? How do you think it works? We've got these examples. Tell me more. What's different? How would you use it? Tell me more. Figure it out. Tell me more. Why do you think that? Very, very important to do this. Because you need to call that person forth. They're either in the United States in the 1980s, they were combative or they were indifferent. They were, I don't care, or ready to fight. I mean, really fight. I had grievances filed against me for my obnoxious personality in the 1980s and the 90s when I think about it. This is mind candy for us who have higher educations. It's mind candy for operators who have GEDs. In some countries, they don't graduate. All responses are good responses. And you, as the person in the room, say, oh, how interesting. And if you're really stuck, somebody has said something and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I have not a clue. You say, tell me more. And you just say to the person, this is actually a technique I'm telling you about. Maybe you already use it. Tell me more. Oh, tell me more. Okay, how would you use that? Maybe you're doing this at the table where the team is working. Maybe you're in front of the room, but you're demonstrating that respect. This is another, these 3 tools really work together. Talk amongst yourselves. When we put that example up about the blind person and his stick, and you say, okay, find a partner, pair up. How about the person sitting next to you? Okay, that's it. Yeah, just say hello. And now just share your ideas back and forth. Talk amongst yourselves. T-A-Y, talk amongst yourselves. And what you will get the first time, the second time, but maybe the third time, not so much, is a wall of silence if you're working with operators. People will look uncomfortable because they are. I see you nodding. They really are. and people will come out. You have to give them time. You have to get comfortable with their silence. You have to know that you've done nothing wrong, and you have to not fill in the silence with your voice. You hold the silence until you are ready to explode, because you have to mean it, that it's their question. And, you know, I've had times where that talk amongst yourselves combined with the stretch content, combined with teaching with no answers, has made me say, you know, you guys, you're holding back on me, and I'm going to let you get away with it this time. But when we come back from the break, when we come back from our next break, I'm going to have another question for you, and I want to hear this room get noisy. And then they'll start talking to themselves. Or you can say right then and there, I'm going to give you another chance. I want to hear noise in this room. You don't have to talk to me, but you have to talk to your partner. And then you go around. Now, here's a few things that I learned many years ago about going around. Then you go around and you make sure you put your, how dare you put your coffee cup down. You do not walk around with anything in your hand. And when you get to their table, and I hope they're at tables, and I hope they're at tables so that they can be in a small cluster, a small community, a small tribe, if you will. When you get to their table, you are down on your knees. You talk here on the same sight line. You do not stand over somebody and listen to them, even if you listen silently. And not only are you down on your hands and knees, but you are looking not at them. Because of your positional authority as the trainer, as an authority, as the expert, the person who knows the answers, for goodness sakes. If you make eye contact, you'll draw everyone to you. It'll be all about you. You have to disappear, but you also have to listen. And with your presence, if you keep your energy positive and bright, you listen. You just stay there and listen. And then you make a little smile on your face, and you don't even have to make eye contact. And you might say something like, I'm going to the next table. This was wonderful. And you disappear. You recognize the power of your own presence and the blessing of your own authority. If blessing is the right word, but you are giving them your energy. This is just what cats want all the time, and doggies want, and children want. People who are just so plain in their need. They want your energy. So use your energy and get used to doing this. Talk amongst yourselves. People will come out. People will come out. And some people will meet you after class and say, I really hate what you're doing, and I really hate feeling this uncomfortable. And you know what you say? You say, tell me more. And you look away and you say, I'm really interested. Please tell me more. And you look away, quietly look away. And then you say, well, that was, thank you so much. I didn't mean to do that. I've apologized many times when I'm in a culture that has certain norms that are new and strange to me, and I've crossed those norms. Somebody will tell me, and I'll just say thank you, and I'll apologize when the group is together. I don't count. My job is to bring people out. In about a week or so, Robert is preparing it now. Robert, let's put up the one on Carolyn and Janet Jones, first thing on LinkedIn next week. That one's ready already. I'm almost sure it's ready. And you'll see Janet Jones, this lady in her little Christmas earrings, saying, I used to be a shy person. She can barely speak loud enough for us to catch her on the microphone. And she said, I used to be a shy person, but then I came out. I used to be afraid that people would laugh at me. These are real lives these people are having. They had a life before they came into your classroom. That life is meaningful to them. And then there will be Carolyn, who says, I'm a special person. You just got it. You don't have to like me. And you see this person and you think, and they were the closest of friends, Janet and Carolyn. This is on the operator level, gift after gift after gift. And you'll see them. You go onto LinkedIn, it'll be there next week. Okay, Robert? Okay, Gwen.
Yes, for sure.
People come out, they get curious, they try things out, they self-reflect. I'm not talking about it today, but we do self-reflection, so important. And they begin to like the content, they get engaged. I mean, this is interesting stuff. Visual devices. Oh, we have over 1,000 devices in that online system, and they're amazing. People begin to take up space. You'll see them relax in their body and put their arms over other chairs. The hero walks in. This thing that was so hidden away comes out, begins to try it out. What we're doing with these first three, stretch content, teach with no answers, and talk amongst yourselves. So we're giving them stretch content so they have something interesting to think about, is we are deciding where the bar is, calibrating the need and knowing why. This is your event. This is your classroom. This is your session. And your session is made up of two parts: the task, what you need to get done, and the process, how you're going to do it. And that bar gets placed by you based on what you know needs to happen or what hits you in the face when you walk in the room. You move that bar. This is part of our training of trainers. Here it is in the middle. This is sort of like a well-functioning team, not high performance, but well-functioning. There's a focus on content. You're getting things done, but you also have to keep the process lively and nourished and energized. You have to help to shape the emotional room, the process of how people are feeling and how they're thinking. This is a high functioning group, not as high functioning as they can be, but they can get an awful lot done and they don't need a lot of support. They're self-directed, they're comfortable. This is by the seventh or eighth module for operators. I'm just a voice. I'm teaching them, get out of the way. We've got to do our thinking. Their will has come out, they've exercised it. They're beginning to respect their own ability to contribute because they're seeing that they are contributing. This is what it looked like when I was teaching on 9/11. I walked in, this was a Dutch company, it was 9/11, it was even closer to the top. There was no way, we didn't get anything done. We just talked, of course. And this is, for me, this is Toyota. They need nothing, they're just all about business. But this is what we're talking about with the first three items. You're really creating a room where it's safe for people to try out new behaviors, and you're even telling them what the behaviors are. You're just not telling them why. You're doing it so that they feel comfortable with themselves. And in many cases, people have said, literally, this was in the 80s, I have never heard my voice before at work, except in lunchtime, but I've never heard myself. And when I'm amongst people in a group, say anything ever. This was way back when we were just getting a clue about this change that so many of you are so deeply immersed in now. Okay, so at the start, you're up here. And that's what these stretch content, something that we call a normalizing exercise to get people talking. There's no right answer, there's no wrong answer, but it needs to be alive. You need to make it important to you. I'm really interested in what you have to say. I can hardly wait to hear what you have to say. Let me move on to using motion as a handle. Using motion as a handle, what motion really is a way for us, and in this case, operators, to dig deeper, to investigate. We use motion very strongly with supervisors to dig into what's wrong with that changeover, what's wrong with that process. They will name the motion, but keep their eye open for other motion. You know, Robert, will you make a note of this? Let's have a session maybe in March and invite these people back. And we'll talk about the value field, and I can talk about Pauline and what that discovery was all about. Let me do a session on discovery. Would you write a note on that for me, please? Thank you.
Yes, I will.
One of the problems, thank you, with 5S is that it has no way to go deeper. It is pure and simply about compliance. People, you can't develop people when what you really want is the outcome, is compliance. And I introduced motion back in the 1990s because it was a way for, in that case, I was working exclusively with operators to dig into their environment in order to create better visual answers or more visual answers. It is a metric, it is a yardstick, it's a measure. I hope you get this. It's a tool. Motion as a tool provides associates with a way of digging in. They watch their own motion, they become a scientist of it. So whatever methodology you use, you need to have some kind of metric. And what I love about metric is that it is eye-driven in this way. It is my hands and feet. It's my hands that reach and overreach. It's my feet that take me out of my work area to find an answer to something I need. It's my mouth that opens and asks questions. It's my mouth that opens and answers questions. All of those are motion, and I get a chance to track it. And this is one of our major tools, this little memo pad. We ask people to keep track of their motion, the times that they're interrupted during the day and what for, and on the other side of the memo pad, the times that they interrupt someone else, right? Need to know, need to share. It's not methodology, but it's a concept that will give you tremendous insight. You'll get some mileage. You could get 6 months of mileage out of need to know, need to share. You could get another 6 out of keeping track of motion as a metric and letting people do this individually. Don't make a big deal out of it. Don't make people confess to how many times they asked a question, but they'll know about it. Buzz said, I was gone. I traveled 2.5 miles today. No wonder I can't get my work done. I wasn't working. Okay, so this is again, can you see how that will build? It builds in our self-reflection. It builds in a rationale of why this is a problem. And I own it. We never ask people to own the problem. They always own it because it's their hands and feet, and it's what's keeping them struggling every day, tired and fed up. This is also executives, believe it or not. There's our motion list. Anything I have to do that's not my work. And of course, we have to name what is your work. A system of thinking first. Tool number 5. Leave the grumblers alone. If people are grumpy, let them be grumpy. They were grumpy before they met you. Why should they change just because you're happy? Our training is not about teaching good manners. Attendance is mandatory. Participation is voluntary. I know about that. Show up. Just show up. If people are grumpy, we let them be grumpy. It is a non-issue. We let adults be the adults. We have faith in them. Faith is a form of respect. I have had people hate me at the beginning and hate me at the end, and they have been some of the most fabulous visual thinkers I would ever hope to encounter. Their work was impeccable. They didn't like me. They weren't rude to me. One guy, when I came over, I said, blah, 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 blah. And he looked at the table in front of him, didn't look at me. And he said, you're despicable. Wow, I knew when to leave. That was a number of years ago, maybe I was, but it was like, just leave him alone. And what a fabulous visual thinker. I mean, he was prolific and he created, I could take 5 minutes now and find his folder and show you a tremendous amount of, wow, what do I care? They don't like me. They don't have to like me. We don't persuade, we present. We share lots of examples, and they are vivid. We know we have a mighty ally in the human brain function. The brain's appetite will draw associates into the process. It is literally irresistible. So we're capitalizing on that. And I'm using my work in visuality, my methodologies, as an illustration, because I have failed at all of these so that I can present them to you today as being indispensable. And they may help you. You may say, oh, I could try that. Or you could say, I already do that. What's new here? The result is visual thinking gains traction, or whatever that methodology gains traction. You don't have to sell it. People already want it, and the improvements multiply. You must understand. I'm sorry, I shouldn't be talking to you like that. We must understand humans as self-generative. We are self-generative. We have been given this power. I won't say anything further without really going over the edge here. So you don't want to see me over the edge. Grumpy people, so what? It's really grumpy people. Take a look at that. What are you, crazy? What is she, crazy? Supervisors don't supervise. In our work, and when we do work that makes sense, supervisors sit in the room, they sit in the back, they don't sit at the table. We have to help operators rediscover their own internal power, because that is the basis of all respect, self-respect to begin with. But the positional authority of supervisors is ingrained and commanding, and they cannot sit at the table. The second time we meet, and certainly the third time when we begin to actively change the area and do some really gorgeous things, then they're allowed to respond to questions. But do you know how they respond to questions? They say, what do you think? And if they can't do that, then they are told to go out and find a Pepsi and just, come back when they're ready. And operators will wait and wait and wait for us supervisors to tell them what to do, to think, and if they don't get it, they will eventually start talking to each other. That's the way to prove it. And that it's gorgeous. Supervisors don't supervise in the training room. That's the rule, by gum. Those are the 6 respect building protocols. I discovered them. They were hard won. I'm so happy to share them with you. We begin with the decision to intentionally and systematically cultivate the power within every individual, even executives. Thank you very much. I had a wonderful time. I hope some of you stay with your questions, because I'm not done yet. I got a little bit more kick in me. Robert, thank you very much. You were priceless and perfect.
Thank you.
As usual, thank you.